Here's something that happens often. A parent or the child come to us and they say, my kid has good grades in school, they have A's and B's, they're in honors, why is their diagnostic test so low? The child's confused, the parent's confused, they don't know what's going on here because it doesn't match what they expected to get. They wonder if something's wrong, if their grades are misleading, or if something's wrong with test-taking ability. Okay, but that's not necessarily the case. I want to let you know it's completely normal on a standardized test to not perform as well as you'd expect compared to your grades in school. And the reason is they measure different things. So let's talk about what school grades actually measure. Your grade in school isn't just about how well you've mastered the material, it's a combination of other things as well. One factor is homework completion. If you just complete your homework on time and hand it in, whether you get it right or if it's completely wrong, you could still get a very high grade in homework, and that's going to affect your overall grade in that class. Some teachers also include class participation as a part of your score. It could be 10% of your score. So if you volunteer, if you raise your hand, if you behave well in school, you're going to get that impacted on your score as well. Also, when it comes to testing, a lot of the times you have narrow testing. You'll have a test based on what you just learned the past few weeks. So you're studying for specific topics and taking tests on something you just learned compared to a standardized test, which tests a lot of concepts over a longer period of time. And finally, some teachers offer retakes of tests or extra credit. So if you could retake a test, you can make up for a poor test and raise your grade. You could do things in class to earn extra credit. You could do extra projects. Sometimes there are extra credit questions on the test that aren't even related to the material on the test. So that's why grades in school don't necessarily match up with standardized test grades. And there's a broader trend here. Research has shown that GPAs have risen. The average GPA has risen for decades, whereas standardized test scores remain flat or have even declined over that same period. In the late 90s, only about 39% of students had an A, whereas in the 2010s, about 50% of students had an A. So there's a trend of giving students higher scores, higher GPAs, as time goes on. The SAT and ACT, for example, did not follow that trend. So there's a gap between school GPAs and standardized test scores. All right, so what do standardized tests actually measure? What does a test like the SHSAT, the TAKS, or SAT measure? It's not the same as what's measured in school, and that's done on purpose. First, it tests a breadth of knowledge. School tests are narrow, standardized tests are wide as far as the concepts that are covered. For example, on SHSAT, if a student learned fractions in the 6th grade, adding and subtracting fractions, and then forgot that by 8th grade, that's going to show up on the test. So standardized tests measure retention across time, not just in that specific moment, not just what you learned the past few weeks. The second difference is standardized tests ask students to apply concepts, not just recall information. So on school tests, you might be asked to define a specific term that you learned, or to solve a problem similar to one that your teacher solved in school and that you did together as a class. Whereas standardized tests, they present questions in ways that you might not have seen before, and you have to be able to fully understand the concept to apply your knowledge and solve the question correctly. The third difference is time pressure. Standardized tests are made that you have only a small amount of time relatively to school per question. So you have to move through it at a fast pace. Whereas in school, sometimes you have almost unlimited time or more than enough time to finish it at least. So there is that difference as far as the pacing and the pressure of taking the test. Also on standardized tests, there's no extra credit, there's no partial credit, and there's no safety net. So what I mean is you either get a question right or you get it wrong. And there's no way of like getting credit for showing some of the work that you did. It's only going to check your final answer right or wrong. In school, you might also get multiple chances to retake a test, or to like redo something. So like for some standardized tests, you could take it again. Like the SAT could be taken again, the ACT could be taken again. But a test like the SHSAT or the TAKS, it should one and done. All right, so this doesn't mean that your school grades don't mean anything. They're very valuable. They show a consistency in your student. They show how they perform to their peers in their schools. They show engagement. Those are things that matter. They just measure things differently than what a standardized test does. So why does this matter? Well, because if you don't understand the difference between school grades and standardized test scores, you might make one of two possible mistakes. Mistake number one is assuming that your child doesn't have to prepare because they have high grades in school. So some parents will see their kid's report card and think that they're good to go on the SHSAT or the SAT. Okay, but you don't want to just hope that's going to happen. In some cases, it's fine, but a lot of times it's not. And that first diagnostic test is a wake-up call for a lot of students and parents. The other thing is that there are going to be students who don't do as well in school as you do, but have put in an effort to prepare, and they'll end up with a higher score than you because they prepared. Right? So you don't want that to go against you. It's better if you have the high scores in school and you have the high standardized test score to go along with it. The other mistake that parents make is when they panic when they see a low score. When they see a low score, they start to question how well their child could possibly do, and if their child is as smart or capable as they thought they were. As a result, they'll lose confidence. That could rub off on the child, and the child could lose confidence as well. The thing to know is that a low diagnostic score does not mean your child is going to do bad on the test. It's just a different score compared to how they did in school, and they can make up that difference. They could prepare, and they could get a score that matches their GPA. It just takes a little bit of preparation and a little reviewing of material they already learned. All right, so what do we do about this? Now that you know why the gap exists, you can be prepared for closing the gap. Okay, so step one would be to take a diagnostic test early. This is the single most important thing you could do before you buy a book, before you sign up for tutoring, before you join a class. Take a diagnostic test early so you can see where you stand or where your child stands compared to where they want to be. We offer free diagnostic tests on our website for the SAT, SHSAT, TAKS, and other tests. Just go to our website, caddellprep.com, make a free account, and you can access any of those diagnostic tests for free. The second step is to identify specific gaps. So once you take the diagnostic test and you get your score, don't just focus on the score. Look at what topics need to be worked on to raise the score the most. And also review question by question. Was it a careless mistake, or did you really not know how to answer the question? This is where a lot of people could go wrong. If they see a low score, they get overwhelmed and they want to study everything. Okay, it's better to focus on one concept at a time and ideally work on the concepts that are going to raise your score the most. The next step is to practice with test-specific materials. Once you know what you have to work on, make sure you practice with questions that match the type of questions that appear on that test. The SHSAT and the TAKS are both high school entrance exams, but the questions are much different. The SAT and ACT are both tests that students use to apply to college, but again, there are differences in those types of questions. You have to study test-specific questions so you're used to the format, you get used to the patterns of how questions are asked, and you can better identify how to answer the questions going forward. That's something our on-demand courses do well, is they're made specifically for that test from the ground up. We analyze the questions that appear on the test, and that's how we built our lessons and built our practice questions. Step 4 is to take practice tests regularly. Studying concepts is important, but you're going to have to test your knowledge and see if you're improving and then reevaluate what you have to focus your attention on. Taking practice tests also builds stamina. It builds timing. Like, that's a common question. How much time do I put per question? I don't like to give an answer for that because some questions take longer than others and some are shorter than others, right? So they balance each other out. You're going to learn timing by taking full tests and sitting for it. And step 5 is review mistakes, not just look at the scores. After each practice test, look at which ones you got wrong, learn from your mistakes. Again, ask yourself if it was a careless mistake or if you really didn't understand it, and identify what you have to practice more or what concepts you have to review to move forward. Your wrong answers give you so much insight into what you have to do to improve your scores.